We look forward to a return to pre-COVID attendance, but we take a lot of joy these days in the guests that we do have visiting, and we're so happy to be open and supporting the community. So architecture matters to cultural and educational organizations. And Clark Planetarium has experienced an arc in architectural philosophy since the new facility was built. The Olympics came to Utah in 2002, and there was a lot of development. Clark Planetarium was part of that development burst and was placed in a new development just west of downtown in what was then known as the Gateway Mall. At the time, this was a desirable location. It was new and it was busy and we had a lot of foot traffic. Our building is part of a retail mall and our facade reflects that we are part of the development rather than our mission. We also intentionally left out windows so that we could create a dark, spacey, and immersive environment. Now we're always just shocked when we go outside and find out that it snowed and we had no idea because there's no windows. So as we look to the future, we desire a building that reflects our mission and plays on the natural beauty of the Salt Lake Valley. Some excellent examples of buildings that reflect the mission are the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco with its living roof, or even right here in Salt Lake, the Natural History Museum reflects the beautiful Utah Red Rock Canyons. And of course, in downtown, lighting is of course an issue. There are lights everywhere in downtown, and this is terrible for night sky viewing. We have to leave our building and host viewing parties elsewhere in the valley because of the light island in which we are situated. So why are we here? We believe that studying the cosmos puts our human experience into perspective. And knowing that humans have looked to the sky to chart seasons and make meaning, we partner with and support organizations that combat light pollution. An astounding number of people haven't seen the Milky Way, and the natural world relies on dark skies. This matters to the planetarium and it matters to humans. How can you be involved with Clark Planetarium? Well, you can support our dark skies related programming. We host guest speakers on a wide variety of topics. We ask for partners on events. And you can support Clark Planetarium or any other science center or museum of your choice that you care about by becoming a member, patronizing the facility. So supporting organizations like planetariums help kids, families, and individuals connect with the night sky and science. And with that, I would like to hand it over to my incredible colleague, Duke Johnson, to talk a little bit more in depth about the dark skies.
All right, yeah, thank you for bearing with me while I got the microphone unmuted. And thanks for the introduction, Lindsay. It's my honor today to be able to take all of you on a journey with me to some of the places that I like to go and talk about why it's important that we support work that allows these places to still exist and that we even kind of encroach on the light islands that we'll find. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes around so that everybody gets a chance to come out and enjoy the natural beauty that really is all around them. We just have to be able to see it. And right now you're looking with me at our path forward. There's a bridge that goes to the Tetons. And of course you can see the mountains in the moonlight and the Milky Way high overhead to the left. And it's situations like this that really just reconnect me and a number of other people that I know to the natural world. Early people were connected to the natural world and the universe in ways that I don't even think we can imagine. All that they had to do was look up anywhere that they wanted into the night sky and they'd see a sky filled with stars. They'd see a galaxy and all the things beyond. And right now, we usually don't get to see skies like this because we live in the city. So for the photographs that I'm going to be showing you in the presentation, I end up having to travel 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours one way to go and capture some of these images that are in the places that are now few and far between. How amazing would it be if we didn't have to do that, if families wouldn't have to do that with their kids? Because right now, you might have to go to places like Mauna Kea in Hawaii. And here you see a couple of their large telescopes. You've got Alpha and Beta Centauri, and the Southern Cross. And we know we can see different stars in the night sky by our position on Earth. But it really is only in getting out away from all of the other lights around us that we get to see skies like this. Well, over the years, cities have grown and we see more and more light. And if we're seeing images like this, we know that they were taken from spacecraft. So orbiting satellites or the International Space Station is able to take pictures of what it looks like for any place around the world. Here we see the United States at night, and it looks kind of lit up on the East Coast especially. And I know I used to live out that way for about 10 years. It's almost impossible to find a dark sky. We also have to realize that one of the things that's happening is that all of that light is wasted light because it's going straight up into the sky and out so we can see it. It isn't placed on the ground or around us to provide help or safety. It's just wasted light, which is billions and billions of dollars each and every year that all of us are evidently okay with paying with. Here, the next slide tells an even more important story because it shows you how much the light bleeds into surrounding areas. So in so many spots, it's impossible for kids and people to see the Milky Way. It's impossible for them to get out and see more than a handful of about 5 stars. It's only when we start to look at these, the innermost parts of these dark black regions, and that's where I typically try to go on my trips, that you actually get away from all the extra light that is always annoying, at least to photographers that like to do night sky photography. Cities are really important places, and we know that there's good and bad that go along with them. We find out that they're wonderful places to go and have convenience, have modern amenities, access to goods and services, and public transportation, jobs. The list goes on and on. At the same time, and you can kind of see from the Capitol here in Utah, going straight out, that's State Street, going toward the top of the image. If we don't pay special attention to the way that we light and the way that we use light, we wind up to creating these light islands and just depriving people, especially those that don't travel outside of the city very much, which of course also becomes an equity issue. We deprive them of their view of the night sky. So the thing for me is that when we do that, we lose our sense of importance. We have to realize that we are not probably as important as we all think we are, because in this area, in the way that we look at our world, it's a really big place, but there's a lot beyond the world. And we are just really, really small cogs in that wheel. I'll come back to that theme here in just a couple of minutes. Before we do, though, I want to show you the results of lighting. So you might say, look at the image and say, wow, what a wonderful sunset as the Summer Triangle and the Milky Way are setting over Turret Arch in Arches National Park. Unfortunately, that's Moab, and that was 14 years ago. And you can see there was a little bit of extra haze, a little more, a few low-level clouds, and that light island effect is really pronounced. Here, another image from the park on a different trip, but off to the right, behind that tree, it's just all blown out with the light from the city, which is really too bad because the rest of the sky is amazing. Here we see the windows in Arches, and just like the last 2 images, you can kind of see the orange blob and then the bigger, brighter blob over here. And while it's beautiful to be out in these parks at night and to make our own connections, we realize that it is getting worse. And so maybe there is something we can do about that. Again, similar fashion, if you look off to the left, again, what a wonderful sunset. Or you realize the sun doesn't really set over here. This is just Jackson. So that's Jenny Lake by the Tetons. So even that far out, you're still having to try to find the best view of the dark skies that you can. Finding a good view means putting the cities to your back, or at least to the side, as in this image. And there are a few places where you can successfully get away from a lot of that city light. So this is below Dead Horse Point and the Colorado River. are places I like to go. Another place that would be fun to go, but it's probably not going to happen anytime soon, is a whole different galaxy. We realize that our galaxy is large, but and I was talking about our place in everything. And if we look at our place, this is a galaxy with twice as many stars, the Andromeda Galaxy. And it's on a collision course, so it'll hit us in about 4.5 billion years. So we don't have to worry about that too much. But if we think about it, that's just one of, hundreds of billions of galaxies in the known universe. We're not very big or very important. And as I said, it's going to take a long time for all that to happen. Well, one way we can connect with time is to go out and watch time pass. We can watch stars rise and we can watch them travel through their motions in the sky. This is an image looking toward the North Star up in the upper left. That's the one that's moving the least. And this is out in Capitol Reef. So we wind up being able to see the motions that occur over time. And this is just moonlight helping to provide light for the image, which is just fine. Luckily, the moon goes down soon, and then you can see everything in, that makes the sky look even better. Well, right now, are we connected to what's going on? So Comet Neowise, I'd love, if we were all in person, I could ask for a show of hands as to how many folks got out to see Comet Neowise. It's an amazing comet. Wasn't around for long. It kind of peaked over about a week and a half. And I was lucky enough to be up in North Dakota during that time. Now, this image was taken at about 11 o'clock in the evening, but I'm up in the far north, so there's a lot of twilight. And there are still really no cities. It's still really pretty dark up there. And it gives you that sense of just being out and being connected. A couple more quick comet images. For this one, I ask you to think about in your role as architects and people that deal with architecture and lighting. Have you ever gotten lucky in a project in one way or another? Have you ever found a way to bring the right people together at the right times? Well, if that's happened, that's wonderful. If not, then I think it would be worth considering, because if you can get the right people in the right places at the right times, you can have conversations that are really important. For instance, right here, you can see that the trees are all lit up. Well, the train's certainly not doing that, but the park that I'm in has some really big lights, and all that energy that we're spending and all of those, the fixtures around are simply helping to light up those trees for all the wildlife around, which don't really need that. That's great. Have you ever visited Dark Sky Location? Is up on the poll. If you're happening to look, 72% say yes. If you haven't, I highly encourage you to go out and do that. It's amazing. But my point here, I think, in this image is we don't need to light the trees. It's not something that's probably worth paying for. Then planning. I realized that if I came home on just the right day, and if I was willing to change my plans and travel really early and make a really long day of it, I could get from North Dakota down here to Great Fountain Geyser and take this picture. And, if you're in Yellowstone Park, always worth going out at night. It's a wonderful place. But here we go, see the reflected comet. I had to be willing to make some changes and do a few things that I wouldn't normally have done. And when I went out to take this image, if you look to the right side of the image, all the photographers were set up over, there were about 11 folks set up over here, just off the frame, up on the side. And I walked out and looked and I went, I know where the comet's going to be. So I walked out over to the benches and I was all by myself, and I set up and I waited for the sun to set and for the display to unfold. And after it got suitably dark, a lot of people moved. Some left, but again, they hadn't thought far enough ahead to understand what was going on. So having a deep understanding of what's possible can really make a difference in the things that you do. In this image, I highlight Perseverance at the top because this is about a 4-mile hike in to Horseshoe Canyon. It's called the Great Gallery and the Ghost Panel in the upper right. You see the bright star Sirius and the constellation Canis Major. I only had about 20 minutes in order to get this shot, and I had to hike in, and I hiked in. It was supposed to be clear, but it was completely cloudy. So since you've hiked in, you put forth the effort, right? So you might as well stay. So we hung out for about 4 hours to see if just at the last moment the sky would part and we would be rewarded. And as luck would have it, we actually were. But we could have given up anywhere before that happened. And that would have been a really sad thing, because the extra little bit of haze that was still in the sky made Sirius even brighter. And I wouldn't say that it looks angry, but it looks wonderful, because it's just this twinkling beacon up over this entire scape. And I think part of my other message is don't follow the crowd. There's a lot of folks, and unfortunately, and a lot of them aren't with us today. A lot of them aren't going to get the message from the other panelists that's going to be really important to all of you. And they're going to keep doing things the way they've always done them. If you do things the way you've always done them, you're going to get the same results. And it's just like the images I've showed you before, with lights all over the place. Kind of in this final image where I say, don't follow the crowd. When I walked out in the morning, this is in Iceland, we call this the Dinosaur Rock. And I walked out, there was a workshop that was going to be being held over here. There was probably about 15 or 18 photographers up around the left side of the image. But you could see the way the sky was starting to light up, and all the people on the left were looking toward the rock, and they were putting this part of the image, okay, that's what they were getting. You had to be back, way back at a little bit less of an optimal angle for the rock. But if you chose to do that, you'd be rewarded with the reflectance of the image of the sky and the entire color of the sky unfolding above you. So it's really important to look around and say, do I really want to be doing what all those other people are? Or can I go out and be a leader in doing things a little bit differently? And as it turned out, the next photographer that came down the hillside came and set up over just to the right of me. Couple images really quick, just to show you again kind of what's possible if you go out and know what you can expect. Here, New Year's Eve, you've got to be willing to do what's necessary when it's necessary. You go out, you can get Sirius, Orion the Hunter, this V that is Taurus the Bull, and the Pleiades, all up over some of the pillars after a big snowstorm in Bryce Canyon. And yeah, it was 20 below, but gosh, I had the park to myself, and how wonderful that was. Aurora up in Yellowknife. It was 40 below. That's really hard on your gear and hard on you, but toward the end of our trip, we wound up getting this image right before we were about to quit for the evening. We were out standing on a frozen lake bed for about 8 hours. It was actually kind of fun. Okay, can you be influenced now in another place by the surroundings? So this is Lake Mývatn in Iceland. If you look off to the left, I did a lot of work to minimize the light coming in on this side of the image, but you've got a lot of light that took place over here. I want you to think about the way that this could have been done differently. Is it possible that if people were really thinking about the lighting for those hotels, all the guests in those hotels would have had a view similar to the one that I got by, again, kind of driving to a different place, going off the beaten path, climbing a hillside and going over the edge? What if they didn't have to do that? What if we could design spaces and lighting that was functional and could actually provide safety while making the experience just amazing? And I know that's what some of the other panelists are going to talk about today, but when you're thinking about your design, think about what you could do to enhance the natural beauty that's all around us. Can you help people reconnect? We can't go back in time, but this is Falls Kiva in the moonlight outside, and I lit it with a big flashlight inside. Imagine what it was like for people long ago. Can we get back more toward what that may have been like? Or do you just need to go out in Zion and look in the right direction? Are you ready to embrace dynamic and changing conditions? Because for this, I was camping and all I needed to do was decide that I was going to leave my campsite instead of going to bed as the storm rolled in around sunset and go up the hill and go and actually take a few pictures. Well, there certainly aren't that many pictures of lightning over Devil's Tower, but there sure could be. But everybody else just decided, oh, the storm's coming, and went inside. And then finally, can you see beyond the visible? Can you see beyond what's there? I just recently got my camera modified, so you'll notice there's a lot more red in the image in the Milky Way, so that it picks up the light that's not currently visible to us, to our naked eye, but the camera now sees it. So it changes our view. It changes the perspective that we have. And if we're willing to look in places that we may not have even seen connections before, seen to explore different ways of doing things, I think the results could be amazing. This is my plea for all of you to consider possibly doing things differently. If you haven't looked at these things before, please look at them now. If you have, I'm so thankful that we have thoughtful people working to help all of us and our kids have a future that involves the night sky and involves making us all feel a lot more connected. Thank you all for your vision, and we appreciate your time here with us today.
Thanks, Lindsay and Duke. That was a great introduction to now moving into architecture. So wonderful images. I wanted to ask everyone to think a little bit back to when we were in school. Many of you, I know in my situation, required reading was the book by Junichiro Tanizaki, which was called In Praise of Shadows. And in that text, we were invited to heighten our awareness and appreciation of the role of light, shadow, and yes, even darkness in our experience of architecture and of space. And today our panel is inviting us all to spend a little time thinking about darkness and the role that we have as architects to preserve the dark sky as we are working in our field. For us to consider the night sky as we develop architecture means that we start to think about the fact that spaces and places that we design are occupied and experienced both during the day, but also at night. And in our culture, we know that daytime is often privileged. But when we think about what we do as architects, we can expand our awareness of how architecture is inhabited during those non-peak hours. When we were back in architecture school, we think about how the buildings and the surroundings we experienced during many nights that we stayed on campus. We were living then in a space that really wasn't meant to be a dwelling. And then today we can find ourselves working from homes, working from our gardens, or wherever we can find a Wi-Fi connection. So we can start to think about the changing workplace and how our work lives are evolving both day and at night, and in this new reality that we're all experiencing in our professional and creative lives. Darkness is defined as absence of light. This is really the perception that we have of an absence of light. So one example is when the sun is 18 degrees below the horizon, we can perceive our environment to be dark. That's astronomical darkness. However, as some of our other panelists already mentioned, we rarely experience darkness anymore due to the abundance of artificial light in our environment. And we can now think of darkness as an endangered resource in our world, as fewer and fewer of us have access to the night sky. And we see that, and Lindsay mentioned this in her statistics as well. As architects, we have a framework for design excellence that was brought forward 1 year ago this month by the AIA when they adopted the framework for design excellence. It was formerly known as the KEYNOTE Top 10 Measures for Design. And the AIA recognizes that climate action is a critically urgent topic for our society, and for us as architects, we're very well positioned to influence and make impactful change in this area. The framework for design excellence helps us to start to structure our design work, to set meaningful goals and targeted outcomes in our work, and then also to facilitate conversations that we have with our clients and with the communities that we're serving as architects. And this design metric 3 of this framework recognizes sustainable design, protects and benefits the natural ecosystems and habitats in the presence of human development. And it involves things like an understanding of the larger regional ecosystem, things like climate, soils, plants, and animal systems in which our projects are sited. We also can consider how the design can respond to ecology of place. We also want to think about how design helps users to become more aware and connected with place and within the regional ecosystem that we're designing within. We can think about how design can minimize negative impacts on wildlife, including birds, and also how our projects contribute to biodiversity and the preservation and restoration of habitats and ecosystems. And it's really through this lens that I'm going to be sharing a recently completed hospitality project that we completed in Alaska. The first time I saw the Northern Lights, I was on an overnight flight from Salt Lake City to Amsterdam. And during the night, the flight attendant, who also happened to be my sister, woke me up, and that's probably why she felt comfortable waking up one of the passengers. And she told me to open my window and look out. I was floored at the absolute beauty of what I saw on that flight at 30,000 feet above the earth, and the way the sky was changing so dramatically over the time I should have been sleeping, but instead was mesmerized with the Northern Lights out that small airplane window. And then fast forward a year later, a client approached us to build a small hotel for astrotourism in Alaska. The guests for this hotel would be travelers from around the world who came in search of capturing a glimpse of the Northern Lights. And many of them were photography buffs like Duke, who were really seeking to capture the experience of that view in their photographs. And this was essentially the program for the Aurora Villa Hotel, to serve the traveler in search of experiencing the Aurora Borealis, or the Northern Lights. The hotel is located outside of Fairbanks, Alaska. Its position in the world makes it optimal for viewing the night sky and for catching a glimpse of those Northern Lights, the scientific name being Aurora Borealis. In this location, the season for viewing the lights spans this month, September through April. And the hotel, when it opened, was fully booked every single night during the season, with photographers seeking this view. Our goal was to be good neighbors. We worked at keeping the massing small and artificial light to a minimum, especially at night, to control the direction of lighting and avoid intruding on the privacy of other guests, and also to minimize the impact of this development on wildlife in the area. So this means avoiding glare that trespasses over property lines, and in a hotel like this, thinking about light emanating from the adjacent rooms as well. We were interested in retaining the community's very remote character and reducing sky glow in the work, and providing a clear view of the night sky as a resource for the guests, something to be preserved and protected. That was really important to us in the project, and certainly for the client as well. So we were looking at controlling stray and excessive lighting and visual clutter and sky glow, which would detract from protecting the ecology of the area. Research shows that artificial night lighting disrupts the migration, feeding, and breeding habits of many wildlife species. And it can even, we found, impact negatively the growth patterns of trees, which is interesting that it affects not just wildlife and people, which we know, but also the plant life. Moving on to the design of the project and our solution for the hotel, the site involved a location that had already had a small amount of development. The shaded building that you see on the lower part of the screen was existing. And we retained this building as for use for the services for the hotel. The service functions, including guest laundry and cleaning services, are housed in this building, which we retained. The site is sloped downward to the northeast and allows for natural, unobstructed views of the sky. The site had already been partially cleared, so no new tree removal was necessary. when the owners began the development of the site, and we determined the ideal location and orientation of the hotel. Looking at the program through these floor plans, each room was oriented and positioned for unobstructed views of the horizon during the day, and then the night sky each night. And you can see a staggered plan concept that shows the king and double queen suites as they're oriented toward the views and then designed for privacy. We also included public spaces for gathering. The days are extreme in the Arctic in terms of both their duration and the temperature. And because of the Earth's tilt, the areas above the Arctic Circle receive 24 hours of sunlight each summer, but then 24 hours of darkness each winter. And there are very long days and very long nights and not a whole lot to do, especially in the winter in the closest city of Fairbanks. So the public spaces were important as well in this project. And the guests spend many hours waiting for the Aurora Borealis to appear either in the room or in the public spaces of the villa. And Duke, this would probably be better to wait inside than outside, which is what a lot of people do during this extreme cold climate. In terms of lighting, there were some areas of Alaska that experienced complete darkness, and this was one from November to January. It's a phenomenon known as polar darkness. And so we had to think about that as we were designing this project. The guest rooms have full height glazing with small seating areas positioned near the windows. The visitors, again, are waiting sometimes many hours after dark just for a chance to glimpse the Aurora Borealis, and this zone provides a comfortable place for them to pass the time. The massing, you can see, was developed for both these optimal views with the glazing and also stepping back for privacy for the different units. Close up looking at the window system and our cedar rain screen. Each guest room is fitted with both standard LED lighting system and then also red LED lights to provide the ideal illumination for night photography. And the lighting strategy for each of these guest rooms was developed to minimize light pollution from the units and to protect the quality of the night photographs that these visitors will be taking. And they've come sometimes from across the globe to take in this location. You can see here an image of the red lights in operation. The hotel, again, is equipped with both lighting systems, but there are controls that can switch all the lighting to red during the peak season for viewing and photographing, and at night to make sure that one guest's lighting doesn't impact another photographer and minimizes the impact on the landscape. This is a view of one of the public spaces showing that red LED lighting. And moving inside, we can see the entrance and the guest check-in desk. The lobby and lounge area is behind. And again, these feature fully glazed walls for photography and unobstructed views out to the horizon and to the sky. We have a shared kitchen for the guests, so they prepare their snacks and coffee, and then we have a dining area where guests can share a meal or pass the time in conversation or playing board games as they're waiting for the skies to change. Moving into the guest suites, we position the bathrooms and support spaces that are away from the windows to preserve the seating areas and the view corridor. So these are tucked in the back without views, and we kept seating areas and the view corridors open for the guests. So here we have kind of a summary of the metric 3 design for ecology. And again, this is a great guide for us as we ask ourselves the following questions when we're designing, considering ecology. How can a building respond to a particular place that it's located? How might our designs help users to become more aware and more connected to a place and its position within a larger ecosystem? How can we as architects minimize negative impacts of the buildings that we're designing on wildlife? And then finally, we can think about how a project contributes to biodiversity and the preservation or restoration of habitats and ecosystems. So these are all things that we can think about. And at the end, we will provide some resources for best practices in design. But this is also something that I think we can think about in terms of lighting, because that's something that's often within our control as well as architects. We should remember that the main objective of outdoor lighting should be focused on public safety and work to limit artificial light sources with glare, position light sources close to the ground. Outdoor lighting fixtures should be shielded, and we can make generous use of timers and motion sensors on all the fixtures that we specify. Illuminated signage is another area that is often within our control and specification. And we can limit the operation time to 1 hour after local sunset to 1 hour before local sunrise. And then things like specifying single color displays on a black background and minimizing illuminated surface areas on the signs all can help with protecting our night skies. So I've kind of touched on the architecture, and now we're going to transition from the scale of the building and move into looking at the implications of dark skies at a larger scale, that of urban environments and cities with Valachi. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Wow, Lindsay, Duke, and Anne, that was a fantastic visual feast. It really makes me wish I was in one of your photographs. And so my part of the lecture today, I've titled it "Vibrant Cities, Dark Skies?" ? And that's a question mark there because when we think of vibrant cities, we don't think of dark skies, and vice versa. Can we reimagine nightscapes such that we do have dark skies and meet the needs of city dwellers, meet the expectation of city dwellers? So these are some of the questions on the forefront for myself as a lighting designer and as an instructor at the U with the Dark Sky Studies minor program. And I'd like to share some of my thoughts today with you. So the contemporary city by night. Really, architectural and urban lighting has become an increasingly integral part of our cities. When we think of what makes a world-class city, an image of a night identity, which involves lighting, pops up in our mind. We've seen as economic growth and development happens in newer areas that artificial light soon follows. As a lighting designer, I definitely understand the value that urban light at night brings to a city. It enables and extends the vibrant experience of the city into the nighttime. It enables many different events and activities to continue. It defines a nighttime image. When we think of certain cities, when we think of how we remember them, we often have historic qualities, character that are represented or presented by lighting. Lighting has the potential to enhance in safety and security when employed effectively. Nighttime economies are very much dependent on lighting. And finally, signage, wayfinding, and legibility of the city are made possible by good lighting design. However, we are at a point where the levels of lighting, the quantity of lighting, the area in which there's artificial lighting has risen exponentially. If we compare this image of artificial night sky brightness taken from the spacecraft image from the late 50s to the middle 70s, 1997, and this is what we're projecting for 2025. This is similar to some of the images that Duke had shown earlier on. The scale here is really from black to pink, and green is where you lose visibility of the Milky Way. 2/3 of North American population have lived the past 10 years without being able to see the Milky Way. And 99% of the US population lives with some form of light pollution. Oftentimes when we talk about light pollution, we think about sky glow, which is a really important component of light pollution. But light pollution could be anything like glare, light trespass, where the pesky light from the street light comes into your window and affects the quality of your sleep. Light clutter, decreased visibility at night, and energy waste. The primary thought in all of this is that light that is not useful, light that is directed in ways that are no longer functional or in fact impeding visibility should not be there at all. There are intended consequences of artificial light at night and how they enable cities. At the same time, we've seen an increase in the number of the unintended consequences. We've seen artificial light at night affect sleep and have a huge impact on human health. This is especially for higher intensity blue light. We see the ecological impact from the death of migratory birds to huge numbers of baby sea turtles who are walking in the wrong direction because they are attracted by light, to many more. We also see environmental and atmospheric impact with the way our ozones are reacting with artificial light at night. We see astronomical impact, which Duke has talked about quite a bit today. The loss of cultural heritage, the stories, the poems, the mythologies. What place do they have in a city in which you cannot see the star? How will our grandchildren understand the very simple rhyme, twinkle, twinkle, little star, because there is no star left? And finally, the loss of an existential connection to night sky and universe. Being connected to cosmos, having visibility to what is beyond us, helps us to understand our place in the world. When we are in an orange bubble or orange cloud, as we are, we have a very inflated sense of who we are, and we'll talk more about that. I think Duke talked quite a bit about this earlier. So why are we overlighting? What are the drivers? So perhaps we think more light means a better economy. We have a misconception that more light is more safe. Over the years, we have become accustomed to more light at night. We have been conditioned as a population because just as much as we shape our environment shapes us. So to feel a psychological sense of safety, we are needing more and more light at night. Next would be shareholders being competitive or businesses being competitive for one to be brighter than the other to stand out. Light and energy have become relatively cheap from the time when people had to burn tallow candles or to spend oil, which they could otherwise use as food. Light is a relatively cheap commodity today. And finally, perhaps we are just unaware of what we're losing. What harm could come from putting more light? As the unintended consequences of artificial lighting are on the rise, there is a paradigm shift that we are in the midst of. We are at a critical point where we are becoming more aware of the unintended consequences of artificial lighting at night. And we see numerous organizations that are advocating for dark sky conservations, including Clark Planetarium, the national parks, the International Dark Sky Association, ecology and scientific groups, and universities and their scientific research on artificial light at night and their impact on wildlife populations. Citizen-led groups, Colorado Dark Sky Plateau, Consortium for Dark Sky Studies, the University of Utah Dark Sky Studies program. And as Anne said, we will provide a list of resources at the end of this presentation. And the next thing is astrotourism. Perhaps after a few decades of being constantly in overlit environments, people are seeking darkness. People are seeking a connection that is deeper than what their city is offering to them. People are traveling, they are flying and driving hundreds of miles, thousands of miles to see the Milky Way. This is a real interesting shift, as before, light followed where the economic activity was going, and light was seen as a bringer of economic activity, artificial light. And now perhaps dark skies are bringing the economic activity. So where do we go from here? Can we rethink the balance, where the balance between light and darkness lies? Can we create vibrant cities and dark skies at the same time? What are some resources and strategies to do this? So I have a few slides now that try to address these questions. And it's going to be a little bit of a touch and go. We have about 5 minutes before we stop for Q&A. So there are a lot of resources that are available to us, made possible by IDA, IES, LEED, well building standards, that really go tackle some of these subjects at the depth that they are. The IDA provides prescription not only to the design community, but to residents and to the population at large. LEED offers light pollution reduction credit. Well building standards advocate for lighting that is suitable to circadian lighting, circadian rhythms. And IDA and IES have put together a model lighting ordinance, which separate the city into zones, right from the rural areas to city centers to industrial areas, and prescribe lighting levels that are suitable for each of these zones. I think a question that we need to really address is, how much do we really need? When we are looking into our short history of artificial light, about 140 years ago, in the days of electric tower lighting, the idea of perfect lighting, the idea of a level of night illumination that people were long accustomed to, was that of a brilliant full moon. If we think about what a brilliant full moon, an average moonlight level on a full moonlight is 0.1 lux. And most of our codes ask for a minimum of 2 lux. So our minimum codes are asking for 20 times of average full moonlight, which 140 years ago we considered to be the perfect illumination for the eye. We need to understand our biology of our eye. We have a fascinating organ that has the capability to adapt from 0.1 lux to 100,000 lux. We are just as much conditioned by the night sky as we are of the sun. We see based on contrast, and we have the ability to adapt. If we start to design from perception-based design, we will provide environments of safety while not overlighting environments. We need to understand adaptation and transition as a primary strategy, conduct many site visits to understand what is existing. We can design with light hierarchies, and we can do rigorous calculations to meet uniformity and our planning targets. The position of light matters. Where we're placing the light can determine if someone is melting into the beauty of the dark sky, or if the person is trapped in a small orange bubble. Having light from below our eye level can have profound effects in the way that we can connect and the way we can see. When there is a huge glary light, even if you otherwise have views to the dark skies, you will not be able to see the stars because the light is so many more times brighter than the dark sky itself. Vibrancy. Okay, let's get to the vibrant part. Can we have minimum light but maximum effect? Can we work with colors, material, reflection to really maximize small quantities of light to create vibrant environments, exciting environments, and meet the needs of city dwellers while also preserving our dark skies? And technology. We have an abundance of technology, and we really need to capitalize at this moment the potentiality to reimagine our nightscapes in urban environments. From smart lighting, Internet of Things, holographics, interactive lighting, we really can have and control light only when and where we need it. Finally, creating a concerted vision and resolving lighting conflicts. As the built environment community, these issues are not pertaining to us alone. There are many other people, including citizens, including ecology, including ecologists. And for example, here I have a poster from Tracy Avery, who are advocating for lights out Salt Lake during the bird migration period. The birds are migrating typically in Salt Lake between March and May, in between the hours of 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. How many people really need artificial light at night between those hours? It is not so complicated for us to work with schedules, but we need a greater understanding. We need all these perspectives to come in to inform the way we make decisions. Can we develop a master plan in which we are really thinking about what buildings at night need to be illuminated for expressing character and history? Can we be really choosy about what we're lighting? We are at a point where we need radical change making through collective reimagining and collaboration between disciplines, directing technology, material, and design to create more inspiring, vibrant cities with dark skies. I leave you with this quote from Juhani Pallasmaa from The Eyes of the Skin. Deep shadows and darkness are essential because they dim the sharpness of vision, make depth and distance ambiguous, and invite unconscious peripheral vision and tactile fantasy. Thank you.
Well, it's tough because we don't get to hear applause, but I want to applaud everyone for their and I will tell you, we have at least one question waiting in the Q&A. So I think I'll start there and open it up to all panelists, although I think this is specific to the architects. And then I will open it up to all of our attendees. Please feel free to reach out through the Q&A here. I'm going to also get everyone's, if we can go to that resource slide that we had, or I will put up the resources for contact. The question that I have received is that it's from a student at UVU. They just had a lecture on lighting as it relates to those who are legally blind. Can someone touch on lighting as it relates to accessibility? Anyone? I'm gonna lean on Anne maybe.
Okay. Well, I think I love the question, and it makes me want to kind of think a lot about that. We do need to think about illumination and accessibility, and kind of thinking about brightness and shadow, because a lot of people who are visually impaired can see kind of big extremes in brightness and darkness. And maybe we can send messaging through architecture in that area in a better way than we have in the past. I'm looking at another question, but I think it's an excellent question. And, you know, we think so much about showing differentiation for people who are visually impaired, but not completely blind. That's very, I think it's important for us to think about as designers, and thinking about how we use all of the senses as we design our spaces, and think about what was that? Oh,
Yeah, we just had a little blip on the text. Sorry.
okay.
You're okay. You're okay. I do have one other question in here then. Is it even possible to think that Salt Lake City or any medium-sized city could have a dark sky? Or are we just trying to White Island is? I think that's for everyone. Anyone? No one?
Okay, maybe I can take this one. So I think it's a point where we need to take a leap and make that imagination, and then ask what would that city look like. And we actually did this. We asked this question in my class last semester. So the first question we asked was, is dark skies relevant to a big urban environment at all? And the second one was, why is a dark sky environment especially important to this area? So one of the answers to that was that urban dwellers are perhaps the most disconnected from the natural landscape. And if that we are able to reconnect people to sky, to natural landscapes again, that's a means of inspiring people to advocate for sustainability in the environment. So that's one part of it. Second part of it, I do think that there are a lot of lighting conflicts in large urban areas. There are many needs of different groups. There's needs of ecology, but there's also needs of different types of programs within the city. So what we need to set forth to do is to mitigate those lighting conflicts and to find ways in which we can resolve them. Then if we even start with how much light do we need, I think we'll be able to tremendously reduce the lighting levels in our cities, and as a result have visibility to dark sky.
I don't know if our Salt Lake County folks can speak to kind of a follow-up, it looks like here, about what the local county and state governments do to either support or get in the way of perhaps dark skies advocacy.
One thing we can comment on that, I think, is that a lot of it seems to lie in the municipalities themselves. And I know that, in fact, I think it was Spanish Fork is just right now looking at going to follow the IDA guidelines for what that looks like. So I think it's municipality by municipality, but I think as some start, I think that there's a lot of possibilities that others may jump on that bandwagon if people are made aware of these things in the right ways. I mean, when we can look at the, especially places like Flagstaff, that, I mean, you can go and you're almost in downtown Flagstaff and you can look up and you can see the Milky Way because they've got a Lowell Observatory there, and you can go out and connect right there, and they've got enough lighting to do what they need to do. So I think it's a good model.
We do have a lot of cities in Utah that have adopted dark sky ordinances, from Torrey to Moab to most recently Helper. So we do see this happening in smaller scale cities. When it comes to bigger scale cities, I think it'll take more time.
Are there any examples of some larger scale cities that have enacted even parts of dark skies theories? Or is this kind of a cutting edge conversation?
Well, there's Tucson and Flagstaff in Arizona. Those would be, and Flagstaff is the first dark sky city in the world. There are a few cities in Germany that are making quite a lot of progress. We do see that the part that's growing the most quickly in the dark side movements are national parks or protected areas, and followed by gateway cities. So those are the first, and that's a natural process, I think, that it's happening in. And New Zealand as well. New Zealand is also making strides of progress, Chile. So these are the few areas that I'm aware of.
Well, I don't see too many more questions. There's just a couple. And I think we'll wrap up after these. Are the lights being currently installed on I-15 better or worse for dark skies? I'm gonna go with maybe worse, but you guys tell me. I don't know which lights exactly they're talking about. I haven't necessarily seen I-15 construction here recently. And I don't know if they're talking about an LED versus a regular incandescent bulb, which is what I think I've seen, or if it's just the down lighting that they're talking about here.
Yeah, I haven't seen the lighting that on I-15. It would be interesting to, if anybody else has seen it. So we'll have to look into that. Somebody sent kind of an interesting note in the chat about how our city was transformed in the last week with when the power went out. And I think that that kind of gives us a little bit of a hint. Unfortunately, it was with a kind of a natural disaster, but we got to see what it might be like to have dark skies and less light in our environment. And again, it gave us a little bit of a hint of what the possibilities could be.
Awesome. I do have a couple more questions that have popped up here. How much do commercial developments versus residential developments impact the ability to achieve dark skies? Anyone? I mean, I'm gonna guess here, this is me, and maybe it'll kick off some conversation for you guys. I'm gonna guess commercial developments might be a little tougher to wrangle in, especially with long, big parking areas. That's my very limited experience with lighting and design is in parking lots. But I would assume that might have some impact more so than a residential area, but I don't know if you guys have any knowledge about that.
Well, I was just going to say parking lots are really a problem. And again, we have to remember that, you know, exterior lighting, it should be about public safety, but we've just gone way too far with that. And I think Valachi's take on what a full moon illumination of our cities could be is extremely important. And if we kind of go back to the cues of nature, we could really learn a lot in how we light our streets and parking lots and public spaces. And then I think somebody else was answering this question as well.
Valachi.
I was just going to say gas stations and car dealerships are often what you see on even sky images.
Wow. Well, that's, yeah, now that you mention it, I'm sure. I also have, there's two more here, and we've got a couple more in the chat, and I don't want to miss anybody. So if you want to hang on and stay a couple minutes, we'll try and get through everything. Ideas for getting clients to accept dark sky compatible lighting when security is an issue. I think you guys started to touch on this, Valachi, with your idea of full moon illumination, but I can see how clients might, for example, I'm a woman business owner of sorts in this building. As we were designing this space, we talked a great deal about my safety, both with door locks and with lighting, both for the whole building and for our interior, and what that might do to the street in good ways, because if there's light streaming out of our windows, perhaps it helps keep vagrancy from happening. So are there ways, are there trade-offs here that we've got some good tidbits that we could give our practitioners to use in conversation?
I think one of the things that we need to always be conscious of the resources that our clients have, of course. But one of the things that could really speak to them is using timers and motion sensors. I mean, that's a way to not have spaces unnecessarily illuminated when no one is occupying them. I think that's the big problem. That's the problem, you know, with the car dealerships, right? That these big lots are illuminated and nobody's walking through looking at the cars. You know, that should be done with precision, and safety is important. It's extremely important, but we also have the technology. It's very simple to bring lighting on when it's required and when people are in these spaces. And that's kind of the take, tying it back to an economic savings, a cost savings.
If I can add on to that question. So there's two parts to this. There's safety and then there's security. And in the safety part, I think what makes an environment safe is if there's good transition between spaces. So if you have a huge parking lot and two huge floodlights on either end, then your eye is having to adapt from really bright environment to a very dark environment to a really bright environment again. If we can have spaces with good transition, so lighting levels that are pretty similar to each other, that would be the safety part. And the second part is security, and that usually has to do with cameras and security cameras. I would say that we are at a point in technology, you know, maybe some time ago you needed 1-foot candle for the camera to be able to see, but now we are at a point where you need maybe 0.05. We need 20 times less of that because the camera technology has gotten so much better.
Awesome. I have one last question because I did answer one in text. We had a question about whether or not there were any sample dark skies ordinances. Duke has informed me that the IDA website has some sample text. We have quite a few members of ours who sit on planning commissions. And so this is kind of tied into the other question that I see, which is Park City has a dark sky ordinance, has had one for 20 years, but I see no effect because of the surrounding communities that light the sky. How do we make this more regional? I think it is, as Duke pointed out, it's a municipality by municipality decision, and it will take us working in the places where we live and work to influence and advocate with our voices as architects and protectors of the built environment, to stand up in advocacy with our new connection, with our new partners here from Clark Planetarium. And so I think that might be a perfect way for us to wrap up this conversation today. I'm happy and excited that we've had this talk, but I'm happier that we have this new potential partnership with our resource and expertise at the Clark Planetarium. So Lindsay and Duke, I'd like very much to be able to share your emails in follow-up with everyone. This presentation will be available on YouTube, on our AIA Utah YouTube channel, and we'll post everyone's websites and connection to make sure that we can advance this conversation further, because we're just missing out on so much. I'd like to leave a last few minutes here for our conference chair and president-elect to say any closing remarks.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all of our panelists, Lindsay, Duke, Ann, and Valachi. Great job. And just on behalf of everybody, all the AIA members, we're grateful for the time that you put into it. And it was very enlightening and darkening too. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. If you'll tune in tomorrow, we'll be doing this with the women in architecture, not this topic, but we'll be doing a fun topic with the women in architecture tomorrow over lunch. So you'll tune in at noon. And then we will, I will provide links as I did in the email today, but you can also go straight to our website, aiautah.org, starting tomorrow morning so that you can tune in on time. And we will see you there. Thank you again, everyone. Appreciate you so much, and take good care. Thank you.
Thank you.